and then turn it over to Craig Hayton, our Community Services Director.
Well, thanks, Shauna. Good afternoon, everybody. Whether you're choosing to join us for the first time or you've joined us at the March public meeting, I'd like to welcome you or welcome you back. Thank you for taking the time. Appreciate you engaging in this process. This is a process that we're relying upon public outreach and input. And without further ado, I will turn the presentation over to Diane Jacobs to run through, and certainly will be available for any questions at the end. But then just a reminder for those that are joining live on the 9th that we do have an in-person open house opportunity with the same presentation, but a chance to engage with us in person this afternoon or this evening from 5 to 7 over at the Tempe Center for the Arts. And with that, I'll turn it over to Diane and Brandon. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Diane Jacobs. I'm an architect with Holly Street Studio and pleased to be here with my partner, Brandon Sobiak from DIG, to present the latest iteration of the Rio Salado North Shore Plan. Brandon?
Good afternoon. Brandon Sobiak, landscape architect at DIG Studio. Thanks for being here.
So as Craig mentioned, back in March, we got together and we shared some ideas about what might take place on the north bank of the Tempe Town Lake. It's really kind of the northwest portion of the bank at Tempe Town Lake. We went over some of the critical details of the area and we got a lot of great feedback. So we're here to share what came of that and begin to ask questions for the next iteration. So let's see. Quick intro, we'll just touch base on who we are. But the most important thing is we're going to talk about what we've learned in the meantime about a very complex site. So look closely with us and you can see how some of the design was informed by the many kind of realities on the site. We'll go over the amazing feedback that we got both in person and online, and we'll share with you what that feedback led to in terms of emerging ideas for a concept plan at the north portion of this project. So again, if you're able to join us this evening, we're going to have quite a few staff members from both Holly Street Studio and DIG Studio in the room to have one-on-one conversations, as well as a fair amount of staff folks from the city of Tempe. So what have we learned so far in studying this part of Tempe Town Lake and the Rio Salado? We're never far from remembering and understanding the ecology and the watershed and the flow of water and, in some ways, the lack of water along the Rio Salado. We go back in time to understand how that influenced the landforms, the crossing, the enjoyment of this area, and the very important mitigation of times of flooding. In 2018, Holly Street Studio put together a master plan that began to define kind of activities that could take place based on the topography and connection points and many other things, the activities that could take place around Tempe Town Lake. And you can see, for those of you that have been in the valley since then, that a lot of these activities have taken place in terms of passive and active recreation and development, both public and private, along both the north bank and the south bank of Tempe Town Lake. What's interesting is that the loop is pretty well traveled, but the northwest portion, the activity zone that we're here to talk to you about, is still kind of in need of activation, revegetation, and other things. So that's what we've been focusing on since the early part of this year. In 2018, we decided with all of this information to put together a series of guiding principles. And again, this came from a lot of you and from all of kind of the analysis of the area. And the guiding principles for Tempe Town Lake was that this area is really something that should be embraced by and owned in many ways by the public. There should be a balance between special events and everyday experiences, but this is really a place for everyone. Connectivity was an important part of this master plan, multimodal access from both near and far, connections to various other networks like public transportation, parking garages, and of course the nearby neighborhoods and parks. Shade is at the center of this slide, not by mistake. People that live in the desert, myself included, appreciate trees as a primary source of shade, along with supplementary structures. Opportunity, the ideas of many different activities along this path, not just for folks that are athletic, that want to play sports and run along the river, but also passive activities so that everyone from all walks of life could enjoy this spot. And of course, environmental stewardship, sustainability is the fifth and no less important aspect of the guiding principles for the planning of Tempe Town Lake. So now, as you know, we're focused on the North Bank. So the way that we were able to kind of define this area was to use the topography as an understanding of what would be possible there. So the west side of the North Bank, you can see, was designated as kind of an adventure zone, and we'll get more into that as we move along. The center portion directly connected to parking and the Marquee Theater and some other access point we think of as a place for gathering. And then finally, on the east side, we are connected to the marina and many other kind of active sort of volleyball courts and other active play zones. We are considering this area as a place for play. Now we're going to talk a little bit about why this came to be. Sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
Perfect. No problem. No problem. I was excited to talk. As we touched on last meeting, for those of you who were able to join, the next step as we progress from a high-level master plan into a detailed concept plan was really getting in to site understanding and understanding our constraints and opportunities that exist in a very interesting piece of property that's bordered by the 202 in the lake. And so very quickly, one thing that was noticed immediately was the lack of ecology and vegetation on the site and a desire to restore that and connect to our neighboring parks to the north, the Lopiano Bosque and the greater Papago Park system. I think there's a tremendous opportunity with that. And then, as Diane mentioned, the significant amount of topography on the site, both ducking underneath the 202 and then also reaching up towards the 202, offers some challenges, but also some amazing opportunities for program and views. Next slide. Ownership is something that we've continued to uncover in terms of operations and restrictions and what's possible, from what the city of Tempe owns to what the railroad owns, ADOT's land. So all of these things factor into what can and cannot be built in certain areas, as do underground constraints that you can't see when you're out there in terms of various easements, overhead power lines, underground sewer and water, just a kind of a network of regional infrastructure that kind of winds itself through this area. Next slide. And then you can't forget about, the intent of the lake and that this is, a river and it does fluctuate and it does flood, and that there's a flood, there's a major flood control aspect of this project, and we need to respect that levee and what it provides from safety and flood control, and also getting into access and parking, understanding kind of the spaghetti network of how to get down there, what's built, limited room for expansion in terms of parking and access, and how we can potentially increase that. Next slide. Secondly, after looking at kind of at a plan view of all these things laid over, one interesting thing about this piece of property is how much it expands and contracts in its width, and the topography that kind of comes with that between the 202 and the lake. And so this was just working through the different zones, taking a sectional look at the park, understanding where opportunities may exist to create program and landscape opportunities. And underneath in that black dashed line area is kind of that limit of levee. And we've met with Flood Control District and understand some of the constraints around that. but also some opportunities to revegetate and make that area very, very nice. So here you see, especially when it becomes the center of the park, it becomes much more dynamic with the bridge section, overhead power lines, connections under the 202, a lot of things to consider as we look at plan layouts. And finally, as we move furthest east towards the marina, the section gets much tighter and includes reinforced subgrade sections for the levee that we need to be aware of, but also opportunities to connect to the north in these little passages through the 202 that can be activated in a creative way.
So just a quick comment about these analysis slides that Brandon was describing. On a certain level, if you look from up above, it seems like this tiny little spit of land, but it's important that everybody understand that it's 20 plus acres, that there's quite a variety of topography. And on one level with the freeway there's almost like, a sort of impossibility, excuse me, of a project such as this. But then when you really walk the site and you go there at different times of the day and you look at the topography and the different slopes and the adjacency to the water, it's quite interesting and quite exciting. It is kind of constraining, but then it's pretty wonderful when you look at the different opportunities. So let's talk about public input. At the end of March this year, we got together and we shared some of these ideas. We had a little less in terms of a design strategy, but we had a lot in terms of analysis and precedent in other cities. So we spent some time together actually looking at the site because we were at the Tempe Center for the Arts and we did an overview of the project. And then we invited folks to come and talk one-on-one and share their opinions about what we had found and their desires. We spent a lot of time, as these meetings allow for or encourage, writing on Post-its and getting a lot of really great ideas about what was desired here and some input about what, most folks wanted to make sure that didn't happen in this zone. So you can see some of the photographs of the board and the long sort of table maps that we talked over and spent some time together on. And then just like what's going to, and by the way, let me go back a second. This is going to happen again tonight. So hopefully some of you can join us. And then with the help of the city of Tempe, we issued an online survey and you could see that over 1,300 folks went online and took a look at what was going on. And we got over 1,000 responses. And so there was quite a robust kind of amount of public comment and input on this project, which makes our job a lot easier because it's really nice to get these ideas and input from the city. So the key takeaways, and there were many, but I'm going to go over 12 key points. And again, there's a lot to them, but let's just see if we can generalize a little bit so that we can get to the concept plan. So by far, the strongest and most repeated request was that this area embrace shade, trees, and comfortable microclimates. There was the most repeated demand, and the idea here is that no one is surprised by the essential nature of shade and the extreme conditions that happen along this path. And in order to use it, that's a critical component or should be a critical component of our design. Again, you are just south of of Papago Park and the Sonoran Desert. And the idea here is that we use this opportunity adjacent to water to make sure that the lake connects to an ecosystem that is natural and alive and embraces the desert landscape. Making sure that we embrace the idea of the Tempe Town Lake being a continuous, safe, and multi-use pathway, not just for people walking, but for bicycles, skateboards, all different modes of travel, and integration with the light rail, and make sure that we resolve some circulation gaps that are there when you look at some of the pathways that currently exist. People in Tempe and people in general like to move and engage in recreation and fitness. Again, it looks like a thin strip of land from far away, but it's actually quite a bit of acreage where we can help encourage outdoor gyms and fitness loops and other sports activities, passive and active. And there are ways to connect with partners who are able to come in and participate in the expansion of programming and different opportunities along the North Bank. Families love to frequent this place. This is a public area that should last for many, many generations and help continue to create memories. But it was important for people that this is not just like a city park, but a place where you could have interactive features, nature play, intelligent play connection, educational environments, kind of a rejection of traditional playground equipment for this area. And the topography and the adjacencies of the pathway make this a wonderful place for that to happen. And of course, it being right across Tempe Town Lake from Tempe Beach Park, the idea of consistent programming, maybe smaller scale entertainment, organized groups for fitness, festivals, and other activation opportunities were important to the survey respondents as well. Food, beverage, and light retail, and something more, again, integrated with nature and activities taking precedent. The idea that we heard back from many people was that it would be great to have smaller scale food and beverage opportunities there, like cafes, locations for food trucks to park, maybe micro retail, a place for festivals to occur, not necessarily commercialization, but places where these sorts of things can kind of come and go, or maybe live there sort of in an integrated way. Water-based activities. We're reminded by our engineer colleagues at the City of Tempe and many others that Tempe Town Lake is not a swimming hole, but that doesn't mean that we can't lean into some creative water experiences along Tempe Town Lake. And so that was something that was embraced and talked about in our surveys. Identity, art, and uniqueness. This is something that we like to embrace when we are doing projects that can have kind of an artistic nature to them, like multi-sport courts or play zones or different signage and wayfinding, not necessarily art as an object per se, but sort of artful play and integration with the amenities that are in there. And finally, or almost finally, the need for basic amenities, restrooms, drinking water, seating, lighting, etc., making sure that it's a place that is easy to keep pristine and lovely all year round. And that goes along with safety, cleanliness, and maintenance. And finally, number 12 was access and connectivity, making sure that folks can arrive there in ways that align with accessibility, maybe car-centric arrivals, but also pedestrian and bike connections, connection with the light rail, maybe even connections from the Mill Avenue bridges. So being able to walk across and come down to this zone with relative ease and maybe some celebration, something playful in that way as well. So after listening to everyone and incorporating some of the analysis, there are some emerging ideas that are leading to a conceptual plan that we'd like to share today. So we see 10 design drivers for this plan being under 3 categories: site conditions, the reality of that area and what we need to work with and around; public aspirations; and then the possibility of partnerships, collaborations, enhanced amenities, making sure that community, like the boating community, gardening communities, all kinds of opportunities to connect and help make this place not just something that is run by and funded by the city and taxpayers, but maybe connected to other endeavors as well. So Brandon's going to take us through what these drivers mean in physical form.
Yeah, so starting with the site conditions, not to state the obvious, but to state the obvious, the water obviously plays a primary role in its effect on the park space, and that visual and physical connection to the lake corridor. Click to the next. But the kind of response to that is this desire to continuously engage with the water and offer more chances to interact, view, stop, and kind of reflect along the bank itself. So beyond just kind of an access, maintenance access path, how can we create kind of a promenade with a lot of different things going on with it that offers a variety of ways to kind of interact with the lake edge. Next. The second design driver is what we talked about from the sectional cuts is the levee and the restrictions that kind of guide any
I'm kind of
whoop, getting background noise from and any restrictions that may exist from the levee itself. Next slide. But that there's this strong kind of desire of movement that happens and occurs on the top of the levee in the current kind of multi-use path configuration that's also needed for logistical reasons as well. Next slide. And then we see a tremendous opportunity with kind of this green space that we're calling the slope, both from program, from view, from vegetation. Next slide. And to also create kind of a secondary path system offset from the multi-use path that allows this more passive experience and park-like experience that goes at a slower pace. Next slide. Kind of the final site consideration is this idea of connectivity, like Diane was mentioning from the 12 kind of summaries from the community engagement, of looking beyond kind of the limits of work of this North Shore and how this can connect regionally in kind of different ways. And so the first is looking at the Mill Avenue Bridge system, especially with the multi-use path, and how we may be able to create a direct connection down into the multi-use trail system, but then also is looking north and kind of through the 202 to the Lopiano Mesquite Bosque and the Papago Park area and how we can connect to that regional trail system, as well as really looking fully east and fully west as Tempe Town Lake ultimately completes its loop trail.
So what does this mean for stuff to do? So a design driver, a big part of the design driver, in addition to the site issues that Brandon mentioned, is how to put things along this pathway that give us a reason to stop, to get together, to stroll, to kind of move through, or maybe just cross through on your way to another activity at another location. So the design driver sort of solidifies these new activities with the initial sort of hunch from the master plan in 2018 with a little bit of an adjustment. So the west side being, and you'll see in some slides to come, kind of less kind of readily available right out of a car door, we see as a place for biking, skating, riding, running, walking, games, and discovery, and perhaps a little plaza zone that's directly connected to the Elmore Bridge. You can see all along the entire North Shore Park that the southern portion needs to be relatively quiet in terms of construction because of that levee requirement. So again, the activities on the west side would be more on the adventure. And we used to call this center section entertainment. There was talk about an amphitheater or some other kind of amenities such as that. But we really call this area, and we see it more as a gathering zone. And you'll see some areas, sort of big and small, start to emerge in the plan. And finally, on the east side, play. The volleyball courts have a presence there. There's kind of a spectator zone with a lawn along this north portion. And so again, the activities in this design driver are really kind of tied in with what the topography will allow, but also some really playful opportunities with what's going on under the freeway, under the bridges, and how the paths can move through and along that waterway.
Mm-hmm. And then we looked at access and logistics of what are the user groups or who are the user groups that are associated with each one of those amenities, and what's that experience like getting to that amenity, and how does that then shape where that activity should occur on site? And because of the restricted access and where parking's located, this is really a center out kind of experience with this braid that kind of winds it all together. So if you're traveling um, by bike or by skateboard, it's a much different experience than if you were traveling by, car and you're going there for like a small concert or a market or event, and you have a cooler with you or you have a stroller with you. So taking all of those things in account and applying those to the various amenities, this diagram starts to indicate where certain things like event markets or food truck areas or playgrounds even should go, assuming that, toddler only has a certain walking distance associated with it, versus amenities like skate spots or bike spots or fitness courses where the reach or the ability to get there is much greater. And so we use this as a driver to help us arrange amenity in an appropriate way.
So it's no surprise that art continues to be very important to the city of Tempe. Dig and Holly Street worked on the Clark Park project. I think there's almost as much sort of embracing of wayfinding art and kind of playfulness in that project because of the folks that came out and participated than there is architecture and recreation. So it seems like this would be no exception. We do know from our analysis and countless walks along the North Shore that there's art pieces that exist there that have a connection to stories and people from the past and present. And so the idea here is that this existing art is notable and part of the context and the drivers. We also know that there's opportunities at entry locations to create kind of landmark moments that welcome visitors and connect to the broader community. Could be interpretive with information about what you're seeing and where you are, but also, like many cities, sort of embracing their underpasses and infrastructure. There's opportunities for additional lighting and activation of these spaces. If shade is so important to us, then it makes sense as a community that we would sort of consider the opportunities underneath things and around things and in these places where at certain times of the year, standing in the sun and standing in the shade makes a big difference. So the idea of using this design to help create identity, increase ability for wayfinding, and integrate art directly into the amenities that we're using is important as well.
Yeah.
And so this slide, interestingly, in the 20 kind of long acres illustrates where we are comfortably able to build something. If we were going to build a building, these are kind of the zones that are available and potentially less problematic to build anything on. So that's not to say that there are plans for construction of any kind of amenity like a restaurant or a particular sort of recreational component from this diagram, but it's saying that if we were to build something, given the ownership, the overstructure, the understructure, the levy requirements, all the things that we have, these would be optimal. So this is more of an analysis diagram. And finally, or almost finally, we talked about opportunities to partner with different entities that might come in and help create activation. So we have recreation play zones along the hill. Potentially, we work with someone, or the city works with someone that can provide adventure play, climbing, bouldering, outdoor active recreation. The idea here of having partnership for light retail and food and beverage of different kinds, restaurants, cafes, maybe small specialty retail zones and kiosks. It is critical that these projects embrace all kinds of partnerships so that we can enhance these amenities. It's not purely taken care of on the public side, but you have many different kind of bonus moments that you can share and sort of share revenue with these partners. So the idea of having a partner for open lawn gathering or fitness and wellness activities, these are potentials, and they're on this diagram so that we can talk about it a little further with potential partners as well as the public. And finally, the design driver number 10 is how do we and the city and all of you prioritize and phase this project? You know, there is a fantasy scenario that it's built tomorrow, but we all know that the realities of this project, this type of project, begin with a framework, begin with conversation, and begin with a concept master plan that helps new things happen in a controlled, sort of organized fashion that embraces kind of the tenderness of the land, but also the will of the citizens and the realities of kind of the finances of how these elements come to be. So the design driver here is a conversation moving forward about what are the priorities, how do you lay them down, and how do you begin the work of phasing this project so that it could come into reality, you know, within a certain time period. So where we took this is we're presenting to you today the idea of one concept. So instead of little pockets where different things happen, we're presenting this as a strategy where we're creating a unified North Bank Park that addresses all the design drivers that we talked about. In that singular park, we have adventure, we have gathering, and we have play. And these things are outlined as a strategy for how you might develop this area. And the vision for North Shore Park would be something that stands as a counterpart to the energy of the South Bank of Tempe Town Lake. It's a true connection to natural habitats, and you could consider all points west, north, east, and south, if you include the water and the lake, as natural habitats for this park. Embracing a unique view corridor. Anybody that's walked along the North Shore can see that looking back at the city is quite spectacular. It's very different from any other spot on Tempe Town Lake. That this area is a special and protected recreation destination. And by protected, we mean that it's not out in the open, subject to kind of other urban forces, maybe cars or highways, but you have this thing that's nestled up against the water and up against the freeway and sort of begins to sort of embrace this as a special place. And notably that the North Shore Park is a stop along a well-traveled path. So the idea is that the path continues along Town Lake, and this is one of many destinations. And the concept diagram here just begins to show how those paths and the spaghetti of the wires below and above and the bridges begin to help us understand how these areas would be shaped and how the paths and the nodes can come together to form a plan. And here we have the concept diagram that we will be presenting tonight. So Brandon, would you like to share a little bit about each of these areas and what folks might be looking at when they come by?
It'd be good to get into. There's a lot to kind of take in when you look at the full kind of spectrum of the linear park, and so we'll go in section by section, kind of dissecting each spot. But I just wanted to know, I mean, tonight's really again about listening. I know we're here and we're presenting and we're talking about the ideas, but what we're sharing is kind of all these lenses and layers that we've used to build up what you see on the screen and kind of the reasons behind why. But we're very mid-process, and it's a perfect time to discuss what's on the screen and the types of programs and amenities and ideas and things that we'll see today and what resonates and perhaps what doesn't, or what you feel like is high priority or very important. That type of feedback today will help kind of drive the process forward, and especially when it comes to kind of funding and phasing and what comes first, will help drive some of those discussions as well. So we can get into it with the first. With, I guess, the most western portion of the park, which is really the railroad bridge to the Elmore Bridge. And you can see high level, there's this transition and gradient of activity that's more concentrated towards the core of the park or the railroad bridge, where you have parking on that side. So you see plazas, adventure play, and then that transitions into skate spot and bike spot, and then ultimately into demonstration gardens and something that can become something very botanic and very nature based. We have this green around the edges, I think, as opposed to thinking that as like a fill, think of that as kind of like an undercurrent or a foundational layer of an idea of restored ecology, trying to bring back what we can, given the constraints on the site of vegetation, and something that feels riparian and feels appropriate for the banks of the river. And that's a lot of where the geometry of the plan comes in, is something that is inspired and kind of recalling Diane's initial image of the 1948 aerial of what the Rio Salado once looked like, is this move. It was a river of movement and flow and braiding and weaving, and I think what we're getting at with the plan language here is that it's a movement and flow and weaving of different users and different activities and different people that come and visit these spaces, and that there are these special moments and stops along the way. But then there's also these experiences that kind of weave throughout the entire park corridor. So we can keep clicking. These slides are set up to show over in the top left, kind of highlighting what component of the plan we're looking at. And then the rest of the imagery is supporting and kind of saying, hey, these are what ifs. This is what it could look and feel like. And so the first, and this is really a thread that goes all the way from east all the way to west, is let's have more than just one path. This idea of a multi-use bike path is great for that movement, but when you're just walking out there, you want to have a different type of experience. Having a secondary kind of promenade experience at that level was something that was very desired, and we like that idea of being able to break away and kind of experience program and views to the lake at that level. Some nice examples of how that could work. The second is this idea of a waterfront promenade, not only just the boardwalk along the edge, but how we restore green along that entire edge. This is the levee area, and there are restrictions, obviously, to what we can do there, but there are creative ways where we can revegetate that edge, working with flood control district, and create a landscape that is more appropriate for a river edge, and within that landscape, create moments of exploration, view, and program. Next slide.
I think also, Brandon, it's important to mention that the connection to the water, or the sort of integration of landforms with that water's edge, will take into account the very delicate sort of balance of the amount of water and the waterway with the edge of the park itself. So it's not our intention to take up water volume, but to sort of connect to it in a way that brings you just a little bit closer.
Brandon, just a time heads up, it's almost quarter till. Just a quick heads up.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll go quickly through these. Like Diane mentioned, non-traditional play environments in that slope area creates really cool opportunities for sliding, climbing, integration with the natural environment. Next. The idea of skate spots, bike spots, these little interventions in the landscape that can create activity for teens and children, keep going, and also provide opportunities for integration of art. So art and amenity and program are all interwoven. Next slide. And then this connection back to the natural environment, and the connection and kind of making that inherent connection back to the desert and Papago Park. Next slide. And then within the bank itself, or the levee itself, creating opportunities for kind of viewing back towards the Center for the Arts, viewing back towards the iconic railroad bridge, just this kind of passive lounge areas. And then next slide is this idea of restoring ecology, using landform in a way where we're able to grow material and like the number one requested program item is tree shade and get tree shade back on the banks. Next slide. And then looking at ways to actually engage the water where you're physically able to go out on the water. I know there's a lot of boat docks and other things on the lake edge currently. Integrating aquatic plants, doing some interesting ways to kind of engage with the water's edge. Next slide. And then opposite of being on the water, being above the water, recognizing the slope and the idea and the possibilities of lookouts are very important to kind of capture that view back towards the city.
So adjacent to that area, the area that we're calling kind of entertainment, but really kind of the gathering zone, the layout here calls for things that would benefit from the roadway that's directly north of the gathering spot. The other thing that's there now is the boat launch and the bridge. So the idea here would be that there are mini plazas underneath both the railroad bridge and the two different Mill Avenue bridges. Anybody that's been there during sunrise or sunset knows that that's kind of a very special vista. There's a perfect spot sort of nestled in between the two bridges for kind of a small gathering stage, perhaps a place to do yoga or gather for a small concert. This is in the okay to build zone. We could have amenities like restrooms, food trucks along the promenade. It says Market Promenade, but that was meant to be kind of more pop-up and temporary, where folks can park along here, retailers or better yet, food trucks. Maybe there's a brick and mortar food and beverage component here that also looks out onto the lake. But this area is comfortably sort of nestled in between those bridges and allows for really interesting viewpoints. And so you can see that integral to our ideas here is connection to the Tempe and Mill Avenue bridges. And the idea here is that perhaps there's sort of a sculptural element that takes a pedestrian, in some cases a cyclist in another, down from up above and onto the promenades. And you can see some of these forms in our precedent can be quite playful. Again, a food and beverage component not meant to be particularly large, but something that's flexible and open and can sort of showcase different opportunities for vendors. A little bit of market, maybe some splash zones, but again, integrated. That's kind of our key word. And the beach that exists there now, in the morning, you can see folks bringing boats down along through here. This feels like it could be embraced as kind of a gathering zone with sand and umbrellas and play looking directly out onto the water. And of course, the ever important restroom idea, a kiosk that's open, safe, easy to clean and disperse throughout the park. There would potentially be a slightly larger one along here with some of the amenities that we're talking about. The open lawn area might look a smaller version of something like this, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to see music along the lake while seeing the sunset, doing some kind of fitness activity and embracing kind of that portion of shade along the bridges. And the opportunity under those bridges and adjacent to the bridges, like for example, over at the Elmore Bridge, the idea of a little plaza of a photo opportunity, maybe artistic displays, exhibits, or interpretive kind of components along there as well in those small plazas. And then moving on to the athletic zone.
Yeah, so the athletic zone is defined by a more compressed footprint, but there's still a lot of room for activities to occur. This is where a lot of the comments about sport courts and keeping active recreation come into play. This is a very appropriate zone for that to happen, especially with kind of the sharp grade and gabing basket that allows for kind of amphitheater seating and different spectating. But one of the biggest components of this kind of section of the park is the enhanced connection north into the Lo Piano Bosque and Papago Park, and saw somebody put in the channel. Ultimately, the McCain Center, this canal path loops up towards the McCain Center as well as underneath the 202. So there's a lot of kind of enhanced connectivity that could happen in the zone along with active recreation. So you can go to the next. We do find an opportunity up on the north piece for kind of food truck that could support, local tournaments and activities that could be happening. There's some really nice pictures of how that could occur along the multi-use trail there on the bottom left. Next slide. Integrated fitness, again, works well with active rec. These could be something that, could be these pit stops along the multi-use path, and something that you experience along the entire corridor, as opposed to just being kind of in one node. Next slide. Artistic ways to do multi-sport courts, something that Craig has pointed out from the city of Tempe multiple times, is that you see this park from above a lot in flying in. And so art at a massive scale seems like a fun idea in terms of branding and really bringing vibrancy to the park, and sport courts could offer that potential. Ways to activate the current topography and hillside on that site with viewing opportunities back to the Mill Avenue Bridge and city, as well as direct viewing activities to the games. One of the biggest things that we've kind of uncovered as well is that little stem wall that you see along the lake is not necessarily needed. So the idea to perforate that in more areas to allow people to kind of have a more intimate experience with viewing and sitting out, looking out to the water, could happen not only here, but throughout the entire plan. Next slide. And then that connection, I think, has possibilities to be a lot of different things. We've seen, amazing art installations, light installations. We've seen these types of spaces turned into skate spots, into climbing walls, into fitness courses. We've heard calls for boat storage. There's plenty of potential. I think that's one thing we'd love to get feedback is, what resonates for this spot. But then if you go just a little bit further east, there's yet another tunnel in space that connects to where the marina is. So both of these, I think, have a potential to be activated in a colorful and more meaningful way than they are currently. Next slide. And just some ideas of boat storage. Next slide. And Diane, you want to wrap?
Yeah. So this is like a very full buffet table. When I hear Brandon and I talk about it, there are many, many things and lots of precedents in places all over the world. But again, remember the design driver here has to do with kind of preserving this part of our ecosystem of our world, making a place for people to come and gather and enjoy and be healthy, and a point of pride for the city as well as the region, and a place where we can sort of improve or lean into kind of economic development for all parties concerned in this area, and turn it over to generations to continue that improvement. So what you saw here today is the basis of a plan that can be some of this, all of this, a version of this, but we'd love to hear your input and begin to refine it further. And tonight, these are some of the boards that will be up, some of these things you saw earlier in the presentation. So the next steps is that we're going to have a public survey online that'll be open until the end of this month. There'll be a council subcommittee late in this summer. The third and final public meeting where we roll out that concept plan will be in the early fall. And at that time, we'll wrap that up, and that will be kind of the guiding document moving forward to make this area, bring it to the next level of fruition. So thanks for listening, and we're really excited to hear feedback.
Okay,
right.
thank you. I'm going to go ahead then and read our questions in the chat to have you answer them. The first one is the McCain Library and Event Space will be at Korean Mill, and McCain's support for Rio is well known. Is there a way to have an ode to that at the start of the path or signage, et cetera, to connect Rio to McCain?
Yeah, I kind of touched on that as I was going, because I was seeing the comments pop up on in this eye over here, and I think that's a really good comment. Lakeview Drive has a direct connection up to where the entry of McCain would be, and actually on the slide Diane had up in terms of wayfinding and art, we had identified that point as a major entrance into the North Shore Park. So yes, I think recognizing that both under the 202, but again also through the canal trail, I think is is a really good comment, and I think we can continue to work with the city on what we could do to improve that pedestrian connection up Lakeview to the future McCain Center.
And I think we'd be happy as the city to work with our partners with ASU just to see what that looks like as an integrated system between park, preserves, and then facility within that. Just there's a lot going on within a couple miles between downtown and up to the golf course over at Rolling Hills with grass clippings that I think,
Yep.
providing those connections seems natural. And I know that the transportation team's got the Grand Canal Connection project. So they're making connection projects just from a transportation perspective, but any information that we can provide. I think that's a great comment. So thanks for suggesting that.
Okay, the next one's going to be related to your skate and bike spaces, which I know you highlighted probably after the question was asked, but just to get it on record and then you can specifically address it. Is there a skate park pump track in the plans? And if so, is it possible to prioritize shade or partially building underneath one of the bridges?
So
Go for it, Dan.
you can see from the slide here that the skate spot and the bike spot have integrated shade, structured shade as part of them. So the idea is that, yes, along with natural shade, you'd see the idea here being that there's shade as well along the perimeter of those two amenities. As far as underneath one of the bridges, we love that idea and we're pulling that forward as much as possible. There are some conversations that the city would need to have with ADOT about how to make that work, and that ties directly to parking. But yes, the idea is to kind of lean into that. We're going to recommend those things, those activities at those locations.
Yeah, and one thing I'd add to that, that's an internal comment as we've been discussing kind of the plan as it sits. A lot of this, because of the scale, it's identified as like a moment along a path. And I think there's this desire also to kind of braid and weave these activities through. So while there may be a main skate spot area, I think the idea of having a plaza that could be skatable is kind of interesting. Similar to you may have a main fitness area, having fitness activity or having play activity kind of thread throughout the entire system is something that we may explore too. So you can have these moments where you do have, like you said, shaded bike and skate experiences.
Okay, thank you. And for those in the chat that are putting comments, those will be kept for the record in the summary that we post. Right now, we're just going to go to the questions. So the next question is, the map at the start showed a lookout extending in the middle of the actual riverbed in the area past the dam and before Priest. Is there anything planned for that area where there's no need to restore existing ecology?
I would just say from the city's perspective, we're focused on the area from the Elmore Bridge to the marina currently. Doesn't mean that we won't be looking at additional areas in the future. But our current efforts are just focused in what Diane and Brandon are showing.
Okay, and then the next question asks, which Craig, you can answer, is asking how much the city is working with parks to coordinate and collaborate on mitigating continued homeless issues along the canal and landscaping in the park between the canal and the lake.
Yeah, it's a cooperative effort. Certainly, Parks is one of the teams under my responsibility, as well as Recreation. And that's something that we definitely take serious, especially over the past 10 years. There's been a lot of work that's been made, a lot of effort just in focusing on the natural environment. on managing the spaces both in Papago, but also then some of the areas that do tie into the Tempe Town Lake as well. Added additional tools with park rangers. And we want to make sure whatever we are installing that we're maintaining to a high level as well, and that we're actually, providing some activation within these spaces. And that's going to be a team effort, not just with a parks team, but with a recreation team, and other key stakeholders internal. And then, as Diane mentioned, even with some partner organizations, as we look at providing some unique opportunities. So we definitely take that charge seriously and look forward to really continuing to steward well.
Okay, next question. Will the city be willing to work with emergent and dry skate opportunities, committing to a lack of skate stoppers?
Sounds like a city answer to me.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about what that means and looks like for this area as we're kind of moving forward. I know I've had some conversations kind of proximate to the outreach in the first round to some folks within the skate community, and my contact info is on the project page if you want to reach out to me directly, and then I'll be at the public meeting tonight, but would love to hear more. Thank you.
Wait,
And
what? How do we find your contact info?
If if you look up Tempe North Bank, Shauna.
Yeah, and I was going to say in the chat, I put the direct link to the comment form. And so that goes back to the project website, which has Craig's contact info. And then I can also just send it directly to you. So
Great.
we'll make sure that you find that.
Awesome.
And with that, I can make sure that you get connected with the right folks, just on the larger park system as a whole, but if you get some questions, but would love to chat with you and hear more. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Shauna, I wanted to address something just quickly because there's some partner comments here about accessibility and elderly. It's our philosophy in terms of design, and I think Tempe aligns with this, that a place that's accessible and desirable for everyone is a good space. And that's not just a tagline, but the commitment here is that these places would be more accessible because anybody that's a runner already can make their way around the lake pretty easily. But it is important that we share kind of this area with a variety of abilities and different walks of life. And so this plan is designed to kind of do just that. And for folks who want to go super fast, they'll have a spot to do that as well. That should cover two comments, I think.
Yeah. And then we had another question. Then, David, I'll get to your hand. What's the budget for this project and how will it be funded?
Yeah, I can work through that one. That's going to be a key component as we work through refining what the plan looks like. Getting clear numbers so that we can then identify what the different funding sources are so that we can then keep up this momentum is something that's going to be part of this project, where Diane and team do have a financial consultant on board. We're working closely with our budget office. We've got some placeholder funds in the out years for some design work, but we do want to come out of this looking at our capital program, not having identified a specific number, at what all the different sources are, so we can actually start planning this over the course of, in multiple phases, most likely, but we want to make sure that we keep the momentum going. So I don't have an identified number within the budget, but that's going to come out of this project, and then we'll work through with our budget office on what seems to be the most reasonable way for us to move forward with different elements.
Okay, David, if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Yeah, I want to ask about noise pollution because we have the highway right there and we also have the airport, which is not Tempe's fault, but that's just how it is. And then we start adding in food trucks and sports venues and all these other active uses. And I'm really concerned that that's going to make for a very loud place. And it's probably already harmful for public health. So what considerations is the city using to mitigate sound pollution?
Diane, would you or Brandon like to take that from a design perspective? I know we've got, protection from the freeway with some of the kind of berm top areas, just providing some of that natural break, but I wonder from a design perspective, your thoughts might be.
I think there's 3 or 4 ways that we use to mitigate sound pollution or noise pollution. One of them is absorptive materials, and the best absorptive materials are natural features. And I think by adding to the existing ecological sort of inventory that's there, that will make a difference. But the idea here is that it's a natural public parkway first. And then these amenities are meant to tuck into that as a strategy. So food trucks, for example, I mean, there are ways to mitigate that in terms of their power source, but the idea is that they come and they go and they make their way, so that most of the time this is a quiet, sort of idyllic spot until it's not, and then those things come in. But from a design point of view, the idea is that, and that goes to the comment on the viewport, that these things are accessories and they're much smaller in terms of percentage of footprint than the natural features that exist. I think on event days and festivals, you might have a little bit more liveliness. Interestingly, the freeway, which surprised me, doesn't provide as much noise as we once thought it would. It's surprisingly, I think the water kind of absorbs some of that sound, but I appreciate the comment, and I think it's something that we need to embrace moving forward with our recommendations.
I also
Brandon?
wanted to, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I wanted to see if Brandon had anything to add to that, but please.
No, I think you've nailed it. I think the biggest thing that we can do is add more biomass. I mean, more trees, more absorptive material. And one clarification on the courts, those are more recreational, multi-use sport courts, volleyball courts that are kind of redone that are already existing out there. I mean, most of the activity would be kind of recreational play, and the value of that activity and having activation along the bank goes into some of the questions about safety and whenever you can have people there at different times of the day. Using the spaces, it always feels safer to be in. So, yeah, otherwise, I think Diane nailed it. It's really about adding additional layer of vegetation, tree canopy to help absorb that sound. But the planes are noticeable for sure.
I also wanted to ask if the city can look at incorporating picnic areas into this plan. As renters, sometimes we're not even allowed to have grills, so if we want to have a barbecue with our family, we have to rely on public amenities. But I haven't seen any like picnic areas or gathering spaces like that in this plan.
It's a good comment.
Consider them added.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good comment for kind of the next as we get into the next scale and start showing some different shaded ramada areas, seating areas. The intent of the landscape areas is to integrate pockets where people can picnic and have very passive areas just to look out at the lake, look back at the city and be underneath the shade of trees. So yes, good comment.
Okay, the next question I have, and last one, so if anyone else has questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. Would any of this be potentially funded by the proposed sales tax increases?
I'll generally say I don't believe so. We typically look at our capital program, development impact fees, and other sources. I'll kind of circle back up with our budget office on that one specifically, but it's not anything that I believe that we're looking at unless there are some ties to those specific elements, like on the transportation side, that may go towards funding some transportation elements. So my general answer would be no, but I guess a lot of that's going to depend on some of the examples that are proposed as part of that kind of outreach process as information is shared with the public. So I appreciate that question, and that may be something that we can do some research on.
Okay, and I don't see any other questions. Again, we did put in the chat the direct link for comments. And then these materials will be along with the recorded presentation posted on this project website as well. Was there anything else to wrap us up?
I was just going to state what you said, Shauna, not just the recorded presentation, but we'll also have the materials available for you to pull up if you want to take a look through at your leisure as part of that. Do appreciate everybody being on. Please capture your comments through the survey, but also if you'd like to engage with our team tonight, we'll be over at the Tempe Center for the Arts from 5 to 7 with a presentation that'll start at 5:30, the same presentation here. But look forward to continuing to engage around this, and then we'll be back. I would anticipate after the summer, kind of early fallish, for that next round. Diane, Brendan, anything that you'd like to close with?
It's great to be able to get your feedback. This plan wouldn't look the same without you. So thanks everybody who logged on, and we look forward to seeing everyone tonight.
Yep. Thank you.